should never have happened. She should have never have been allowed to walk free. She should have done some time.
Bryn Spejcher stabbed a man she'd been dating more than 100 times, killing him. She claimed she was suffering from cannabis-induced psychosis. The man she killed was Chad O'Melia. His dad is here to tell us more about him and what he thought of Spejcher's trial. I'm Angenette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. You've probably seen Bryn Spejcher's photo on the internet, maybe on the news, next to a headline about her stabbing her boyfriend 108 times because of cannabis-induced psychosis. At first glance, it sounds like kind of a crazy defense, but the judge presiding over the case believed it was real, and apparently so did prosecutors. The charge in the case was reduced from murder to involuntary manslaughter, which is a non-intentional killing. Spejcher had been dating Chad O'Melia for just a short time back in 2018 when she claimed she and O'Melia smoked pot from a bong at his condo in Sherman Oaks, California. At some point, Spejcher claimed she began to hallucinate, and then things went black, and she stabbed Chad O'Melia with a kitchen knife more than 100 times. She also stabbed herself in the neck when paramedics and police arrived, as you can see in this booking photo. Spejcher claimed at trial that she felt pressure to smoke pot by O'Melia, a claim prosecutors challenged vigorously at trial. In the end, the jury found her guilty of involuntary manslaughter, and prosecutors wanted the toughest, most severe penalty available. So you'd think she might get some jail time, maybe even prison time. But no. The judge, David Worley, sentenced her to 2 years probation and community service, and that is not sitting well with Chad O'Melia's family. Sean O'Melia is Chad O'Melia's father, and he is joining me to talk about his son. Sean, first of all, we're so sorry about the loss of your son. How are you doing in light of everything that's happened and the fact that Bryn Spejcher didn't get any prison time for this?
It's very difficult for our family to kind of understand how somebody could take another human being's life and the system just broke down to the point where that individual is really not suffering any consequence for their action. It's difficult. I don't sleep well. That started about 5.5 years ago when I first got the news that Chad's life had been taken. This morning I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't usually sleep past 3 a.m., 2:30 in the morning. But, you know, I'm blessed. I have a lot of really good family around me. I have a lot of good friends, and I have my faith. So I'm leaning on all of that right now. It's very, very difficult to see the pain that Chad's younger brother has gone through. I saw a picture of him in a newspaper the other day, and that picture really expressed just about everything that we're dealing with. You could see the pain on his face. And, you know, he loved his brother. I loved my son. And Shane has also lost his mother. So this has just been a horrible 6 years for us. And there should be no reason why this took 6 years to get to where it is.
I know that you spent 5 weeks in a courtroom, plus more than 5 years waiting for some type of resolution to this case. I mean, this is unfortunately what our society can offer, this awful journey through the court process that is so hard on families who've lost loved ones. I know that you were disappointed, that's putting it lightly, by what happened. The fact that she was convicted of involuntary manslaughter and then got no prison time. I know that the prosecutor was disappointed as well. You know, that had to be just, I can't imagine as a parent sitting in a courtroom and hearing that from a judge.
Yeah, it was, in some points, it was kind of surreal to listen to his explanation. To me, it was absolving her of any culpability and responsibility for what had occurred. And there are people right now serving prison time that have done much less. So for us as a family, it didn't really make any sense, other than, the judge had showed some bias early on in the case, and I called him out on it. I called him out in the sentencing hearing. I called him out on 9/27 when they reduced the charges, because he started making excuses for her actions, and started almost saying, well, the loss of her medical license is a very difficult thing for her to have to deal with. And I was confused about how he was relating that to the loss of a human life. It didn't make sense to me. By the way, the judge's name is David Worley. And I think my understanding is he's getting ready to retire. So I think that's had an impact on some of the decisions that he has made. He doesn't have to run for re-election.
It's my understanding that the prosecution's experts agreed with this diagnosis of cannabis-induced psychosis from which she was suffering. Is that right? Or, correct me, please, if I'm wrong.
I think, generally speaking, that would be correct. I think each one of them individually brought some other things to the table that the other didn't cover. So it was good to have the three of them there, and the three of them take a look at the video and hear her statement. Dr. Worshing, I believe, was a defense witness, and he brought in his report two things that I thought were extremely important. One was that there had been there is a history of mental illness on the mother's side. Her sister, my understanding from their own words, has been institutionalized most of her life. And the other thing that came out of Dr. Worshing's report, and I think he wrote this for the benefit of Bryn Spejcher, he said that, she should never, ever be around anything like this again. And he kind of is a very intelligent man, tried to, convey in his own words to us so we could understand it. But he was saying that once this type of action or reaction has been tripped in a person's mind, it's much easier for it to be retripped. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I'm only repeating what the man said. Dr. Mahoney.
Makes sense, though. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Was the prosecutor on the case surprised by the fact that the Judge Worley, did not give her any jail time, prison time, what have you?
Oh, I would say not only was the prosecution surprised, they were extremely disappointed. I would say this. I'm going to step out here a little bit, but I would say that just about everybody in that Ventura County justice system was surprised and disappointed in what he did. Mm-hmm. I would say that, you have a prosecutor that's asking for the maximum penalty. You have a probation officer that in their report recommended prison time. And, you had a jury that convicted her, a unanimous conviction, which represents the people of that community, in less than 4 hours. And the judge went completely against all three of those entities and just said, you're free to go.
Sean, I want you to tell me about Chad. I mean, because every headline we see, cannabis-induced psychosis. We see the headline about, the horrific thing that happened to your son. And we don't really hear about Chad. We see Bryn Spejcher's photo, or we see the headline. Tell me about your son, what you want people to know about him.
Well, I think he was the type of person, first thing I would say is he's the type of person that if somebody was bullying somebody else, he'd be the first guy to step up and say, that's got to stop. You know, he did not like injustice. He didn't. I don't like it either. I don't like, you know, somebody picking on somebody that's less capable of defending themselves than somebody else. He loved sports. I mean, he was a sports fanatic. Baseball, football, motocross, you know, a lot of these, he participated in a lot of these as well. He wasn't just a spectator. He played football from the time he was 8 until end of his high school years. And, you know, he loved that. But I think what he loved about that is the friendships that he made and the bond that he had with his teammates. And he had some amazing coaches. He really did. You know, he was smart. He had to work hard for, you know, his grades, but he wasn't afraid to ask questions, especially of people that had experience. When I was young, I grew up with a gentleman. He was a friend of mine for years, and he was in the finance industry, and Chad and him got along very well. Chad spent quite a bit of time with him learning about finance, and I think that's where he kind of found his interest in accounting. And you know, I also gave him some books when he was young, and very young, probably about 9 years old. I gave him that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Cash Flow Quadrant. I had him reading those things. And I explained to him, you know, the market, how it worked. And I think he was really interested in that. I can tell you, I shouldn't say the Shane and some of his friends had a vigil for Chad, and there was quite a few people there. A lot of these young people I knew, a lot of them I didn't know. And it was really amazing to see the support these young people were giving to Chad's brother. And I just remember a few people, you know, people would speak. And I remember this one person, a young lady, stepped forward to speak. And what she said about Chad is she knew that when she was somewhere, like at a party or wherever for the school or whatever their group was, if Chad was there, she knew she was safe. And I didn't know who she was. I still to this day don't really know who she was. But that was pretty amazing to hear about your son. I had a lot of parents that came up to me at the funeral service, and you know, one thing that's very big in our family is respect. You have to absolutely respect elders, ladies, and they brought that to me that day. That was an incredible day. That an overwhelming amount of support and love for Chad. I think the church, Blessed Kateri, holds about 1,300 people. And when I got up to make my remarks, this very difficult day for me, but when I got up to make my remarks, the church was full and the back doors were open and people were still standing outside. And, you know, you can ask other people that you may interview if that's indeed a fact, and they will say it is indeed a fact. And I was grateful for all the support that I got from my colleagues at UCLA. They came and I really am grateful for them. But Chad was just a caring, loving person that, you know, if you needed somebody to talk to, he would take the time to talk to you. He'd listen about you, what's going on in your life, and he would help you in any way that he could. Yeah, he's missed by a lot of people, and I really loved him and really miss my son. I really do.
Has Bryn Spejcher ever reached out to you and apologized or offered anything?
No, she did say something in her final remarks that, was something about she can't understand the pain that we're going through and how horrible the pain must be. But she never said that she's sorry for what happened. Her father was up there and giving his remarks, and I respect the man for doing this. I do. He looked at me and I looked in his eye, and I could tell that man, I would just say, he has been through hell. And I found no joy in that, but he apologized to me for the loss of my son. And if he ever hears this, I want him to know that I respect him for that. Unfortunately, immediately after, he did that and he showed some class, his attorneys immediately got up and started talking to the judge and started the victim blaming defense all over again in his closing statement. Those two attorneys, they've misrepresented the facts to the media in their travels. And I would just make the point, they know the evidence. They saw the evidence. And you've got Michael Goldstein, who's saying that this was a high-strength marijuana, a high-potency marijuana. There is absolutely zero evidence of that fact. There is evidence to the fact of the contrary. Okay? The lab tested the marijuana. Michael Goldstein was not there on 5/28/2018. Okay? He does not know what went in that bong. The lab does. And the container that was there had no warning on the label. He saw that as well. Look, if you take Chad O'Melia out of this equation, what happened here is another human being, any human being you could look at, they were stabbed 108 times. That's how his life was taken. That is no way for a human being to die. And I can't even imagine the amount of pain that he was in, because he was still alive for a while she was still stabbing him. And he must have been thinking, why is she doing this to me? I mean, that's all that could have been going through his head. I'm sorry, but I just, I think that at this point, I've never received an apology from her. I don't think she's capable of giving an apology. I'm really not interested in sitting down with somebody that's not willing to take responsibility for their own actions. I'm not. She killed my son. I'm tired of these attorneys, going to the media and saying that, well, she didn't know what she was getting into. She knew what she was getting into. She knew she was smoking marijuana. Did she know it was going to have that reaction? Probably not. But neither did Chad. So that doesn't make it Chad's fault.
Sean O'Melia feels like the system failed his son, at least in part, by the sentence that Judge Worley gave to Bryn Spejcher.
The DA, they did their job. When you look at what is up against the prosecution, it's like there's almost two sets of rules for the prosecution and the defense. The prosecution has to show everything that they have. If they come up with something, they got to share it. The defense has a much easier road here. The jury, they did their job as well. I mean, those people spent just about 4 weeks of their lives. They gave 4 weeks of their lives to hear this evidence, to listen to all the victim blaming, the attacks on the witnesses by the defense counsel, the attack on the evidence by the defense counsel, which none of it changed after they attacked these people on the stand. And they did their job. They found her guilty. They stuck to the facts, and so did the DA's office. The parole officer, the parole department, probation department, they did their job as well. They recommended felony jail time. So we get to this day, and one man, David Worley, has this whole thing sitting in his hands. We go through an exercise of giving victim impact statements only to discover that he has made up his mind before we even got there that day. And he starts reading off a piece of paper and he lets her go free. It was disgusting. It is evidence of how broken our criminal justice system is, and it's not broken because criminals are being, held accountable for things that they're not doing. It's broken because the innocent taxpayers are not being defended. They're not getting what they're paying for out of their tax dollar or protection against this type of thing. It should never have happened. She should have never have been allowed to walk free. She should have done some time. She should have been treated just equally, just like any other individual that has taken another human being's life. Whether that was murder or manslaughter, it doesn't matter. There are a lot of people in prison right now for manslaughter, and they probably did a lot less than what she did. Thank you.
Sean O'Melia, again, we're so sorry for your loss, and thank you so much for joining us to talk with us about your son. We really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you guys very much.
And that's it for this edition of Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you back here on Monday. Until then, have a great night.